All right, welcome back to another episode of the Uninsured Ankles podcast. Joining me, Nick Swanson, this evening, I've got Jordan Stratton and Josh Barton on the mics. We're going to be missing Haley Everett this evening, but let's get at it, gentlemen. Um, what do we want to start with? All-Star game stuff? Do we want to get into Cooper Flagg? We got some content to get into.
Just some quick reactions to some of the Saturday night stuff. I think we saw there was a lot of really good energy that all was revolving around Mac McClung, and got to tip your cap to Castle too. He pulled out some stuff out of his bag. Like a couple of the dunks that he put down would have been winning dunks in a lot of other years, especially his last dunk of 360 behind the back, cupping it on the way up. Like it was pretty clean, and you saw got a lot of chatter out of some of the other big names in the NBA talking about potential squad doing next year's dunk contest. There was chatter from Levine and Morant, and Giannis said if Morant does it, that he would do it. So I mean,
I'll
look,
believe it
we've
when I see it. I love
exactly
it,
we
but I'll believe it when I see it.
yeah. I also saw video of LeBron from 2009 when he was watching the dunk contest, being like, "Oh yeah, I'm for sure gonna do it in 2010." And we have not seen any LeBron in the dunk contest, so we'll believe it when we see it. But it would be great to have Levine back. We know he brings out his best stuff, and then Jaw's an entertainer. So even if his dunks aren't that good, he would get the crowd hyped up. And Giannis is the last like 4 years, Giannis is always front row with his camera out. He gets hyped over like measly little rim grazers. So he's a fun time for sure.
Yeah.
Two quick questions before we jump into it. One, is this like the biggest blemish on LeBron's legacy is that he hasn't played he hasn't gone in the dunk contest? Like think about Kobe, you think about Jordan, they've done their stuff. They're prolific dunkers. LeBron's a prolific dunker, and he just like, nah, I ain't gonna do it. What's up with
I,
that?
I would say no to that because arguably the greatest dunk contest dunker is Vince Carter. And we watched his career, so I can't say that's a blemish on LeBron's career, but I like where your head's at.
No, I
He
mean,
he's ducking for sure. He doesn't want any of the smoke.
he is ducking. I mean, and at this stage of his career, he's not coming back for it. You don't do it when you're 40 years old, but he should have done it in this first 5 years of his career. Like that's like you're a young guy. That's what you do when you're in the league. If you're athletic, like that's a failure on his part in my mind. I don't love that.
I'm with you, and I think, I mean, part of it is like you're developing some hype around your name when you're going into the dunk contest. It's not like he needed hype on his name at that point. Like it really probably only could have hurt him
Mhm.
if he were to do it, and I'm sure that's why he hasn't done it.
Sure.
But it still would have been fun to see. So
It's
yeah.
eyeballs, man. And that's what the NBA needs is eyeballs. Are we doing all right? Are we doing better in the All-Star game with this new like kind of round robin thing and dunk contest, three-point shooting? Like it feels like we're doing some new things with it. Or is it getting better? Is it still man? What are we thinking around that?
I have no idea what's going on, so I'm starting to pan it already.
I think I'm here for it, and we're recording this before the game actually gets played, so hopefully I'm not just immediately
Games, by the way.
games. Hopefully I'm not just immediately have a terrible take here, but I think it'll end up actually being good for the game, because I think we'll see a little bit more competitiveness since the game's a little bit shorter, and everybody they're still going to want everybody to touch the court. So rotations are going to be quick, energy's going to be high, and if everybody's touching the court in a shorter game, it's usually the guys that aren't the starters
Mm.
that try the hardest, the guys that haven't been there before. Because right now we're at a point where we've got 5 or 6 guys that are starters every single year, and they don't care anymore. That it's not it like it was cool for them when they were younger. They were responsible for making sure the game was fun back then, but the torch has got to be passed to the young guys at some point, and we still have these, 7 or 8 names. Your KD, Steph, LeBron, all the big names of the last 15 years are the ones that are still starting and just don't care enough about it anymore. I think when we're going to have more minutes from the young guys, you might get a little more buy-in.
I think this is the way to look at it. One of the guys you mentioned, LeBron, is literally old enough to have his son in the league. So nothing about the
Not
All-Star
old enough
game in
too. He does have his son in the league.
the last 21 years of LeBron in the All-Star game, he's like, okay, when's this over? I want to get on my vacation. My question in response to the All-Star game, so how about this? The winner of the dunk contest, Mac McClung, winner of the three-point shooting contest, Tyler Hero, the presumptive number one pick, Cooper Flagg. Question for y'all. Are white American hoopers back? Is this 1960 all over again?
Well, let's transition to Cooper Flagg. I think he is like the it topic, right? Like he is the presumptive number one pick. There's been a lot of hype coming through him ever since he kind of broke out in Maine a few years ago. Um, there's some other guys out there, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, Edgecombe, who are I'm excited about this draft as a whole. Let's just put
Yeah.
that out there. And I would love to do a deep dive on that, but we probably should put that for another day. But let's talk about Cooper Flagg. A, is he coming out of the league is he coming into the league this year? Is he coming actually going to be in the draft? And then yeah, we'll start there. Like do we think he's coming into the league with some of the things he said this week?
I know we heard him say earlier this week that he was wanting to stay at Duke for another season. I think that's probably capped. I don't think he's actually going to stay for another year. Now, I can appreciate the sentiment, and I think all the moves that have been made with NIL money are making something like that more lucrative. I think we may have mentioned this before, but with the likes of guys like Hunter Dickinson, who have now been in college for 5 seasons and are making 7 figures playing college hoops, those guys are incentivized to stay in college hoops for longer because even if they were going to make money, a guy like Hunter Dickinson isn't going to probably find a spot in the NBA. He doesn't have the build for it. A perfect example of someone that's similar to him that hasn't really broken out is Drew Timme, who is a consensus All-American for 3 years in a row and is just tearing up the G League. By having those guys stay in college and make 7 figures, it's a better route for them because they're getting a college degree for free and they're getting paid just as much as they would to go play overseas ball, which is probably what they're going to end up doing anyway. So, you know, I think the route is more enticing now than it has ever been. And it's probably for the best. I mean, you're going to see a lot of college athletes probably actually getting their degrees, which is kind of cool. But I don't think that's going to be the case with our consensus number one overall pick.
No, and I think that's the big thing here is we're talking about Hunter Dickinson, who near and dear to my heart are actually far away from my
Far
heart.
away from your heart, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of him. He left my Michigan Wolverines high and dry, and he's kind of an ego dude. But that aside, that's his livelihood. That's all he can make. He can make more money in college than he could in the NBA. He can still play the college. Like, who wants to go back to college? College was a great time, I'm sure, for most of us. Like that, he's playing the college life. He's went to Michigan, he's going to Kansas, he's doing all those things. There's still more money for a Cooper Flag to be made in the NBA.
Hmm.
And even if it's not, even if next year, let's say it's even comparable. Let's say he goes back to Duke and it's comparable amounts of money. That's still delaying his clock. His clock for an NBA contract, a supermax contract, which we all assume he's going to get, is delaying a year. And that's all just trickle down effect of when he's going to get paid. That's years off his career. That's all those things that aren't going to go well. Hunter Dickinson is going to be in the G League. He's going to be overseas. He's going to do something else. And so good for him. I hope more guys get their degrees. I hope that's the path of a lot of guys. I'm kind of tired of these COVID years. I'm tired of all this stuff and people being around 6, 7 years. But that aside, like Cooper Flagg's in the NBA next year.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. If you know me, you know I'm not a big fan of college basketball at all. I often pan it every chance I get. I can't remember the dude's name, but there's a guy who is in Jason Tatum's high school class that is still playing college basketball, which is ridiculous because Jason Tatum is 26 years old, has been in the league for 8 years now, has made two finals, made it to won a finals, like done all these things. And there's a guy from his high school class still in college. So that's just ridiculous. I feel like every year, and especially when there's a top prospect like Cooper Flagg, we always do this song and dance of, oh, this guy's gonna come back for another year of college. He loves college. He's gonna come back. They did it with Carmelo. They did it with Zion. They like you name it. All of the blue chip prospects, it's always like, oh, they're coming back. And then about this time, getting ready for March Madness, it's like, oh, I love college. I want to come back another year. But the reality of it, like both of y'all just said, it's not happening. Even if money's still the same, the prestige of the NBA is what wins out. Like, there's guys who are probably going to pass up money that they could make in college to play in the NBA because the NBA just is it's the cream of the crop. It's playing in the NBA, it doesn't matter how much you get paid in college. Being in the NBA is way more appealing to guys. Now, I think Cooper Flag is going to be amazing. All of the reports out of the USA basketball was when everyone talked highly of him as a 17-year-old with not only
He
was the
he
only
just turned 18 last month.
yeah, so he reclassified, so he's a year younger, which is insane. And he was the only quote unquote college guy on the USA select team. And he wasn't even in college yet. He had just graduated high school, and everyone said a good thing about him. And then on top of that, you look at what he's done in college this year, and he's on pace. This would be for our college basketball expert, Nicholas to fact check me on, but I believe he would be the first freshman to lead his team in all five statistical categories um, coming into the season. I think Cooper Flagg's going to be amazing, and unless the Dallas Mavericks have the first pick, then he's going number one.
I'd be curious where Carmelo is in that spectrum of college freshmen, because that would be the only person in my mind that would even come close to competing and being like a relevant team. There might be some small D1 school that doesn't
Yeah.
matter that has that, but of relevancy, Kamara will be the only one I could think that might rival that. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think I think like you mentioned, yeah, I don't think this is going to touch Flag, but I think we're going to see more and more guys that would be late first rounders or second round picks deferring because they can make more money. They can make way more money in college than they can trying to make an NBA team or in the G League. I mean, G League salaries right now are like $45,000 a year and pre-tax. So it's not even like unless you're a lottery pick and are essentially going to be getting guaranteed contract.
first round.
It's yeah, you're I mean even some of the other first like a later first round guy, yes, they're getting their contract, but they're probably still making more money in college. So the only real enticing thing like you mentioned is accelerating your clock, but there's no guarantees. If you're not one of those top couple picks, uh, you know, historicals say that there's a pretty low chance that you're in the league after a few years. And if you can get those few years making multi millions of dollars at the college level, it's I think it's going to be a route we see more and more, especially if the NBA doesn't expand soon because the talent density is just getting too high.
Yeah, I think too.
I think a first round promise is the dividing line for me at the
Yeah.
NIL. If you're kind of on that, if you're straddling the line, you don't know if you're going to go or not, you're coming back.
Yeah.
But unless you're a senior, if you're a senior, you're like you're in that ballpark, then you go obviously. But it's really that it seems to be making lines a lot clearer than they were 2, 3 years ago, where they were kind of been, I'm just going to bet on myself. I'm going to make it. I'm going to go figure it out.
Yeah. Y'all mentioned Europe and like the competition with European salaries. There's starting to be a trend of European prospects coming over to the US because they can make more in college through NIL than they can in Europe. And a lot of European teams prioritize winning, so they're going to go with the older guys. Nick's shaking his head. Am I wrong? Do I know nothing about college basketball? That's entirely possible.
I am 99% sure that international prospects do not have NIL capabilities in the same way that
Oh,
Americans do.
why is that? Can you educate me on the
I don't
pod?
know it well enough. And like I said, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I think there is stipulations around what they can get as an international prospect in NIL and what their visas allow them to get.
Interesting.
So,
Interesting. I
It,
actually might know this answer, but
yeah, I think we
and
might
so
need to
this is
review it
if
further.
this goes out and you guys fact check me and this is wrong, I'm okay with being wrong on the pod. But I'm pretty sure I've heard that narrative several times before.
yeah, that makes sense because not to diverge too much on the pod, but for certain visas, you can't have a job, and a lot of athletes come over either on student visas or on, well, I guess the majority of them are coming over on student visas, and they can't hold jobs. So, well, see, I know nothing about college basketball. I do know Cooper Flagg's going to be amazing in the NBA when he comes, and it would be really interesting to see him in the dunk contest too next year.
I'd pay for that. I'd chip in for that. Um, so let's talk about
Um,
Cooper Flag. Go ahead.
I think we're going to the same place. On the Cooper Flag note, where do we think is the best landing spot for him? And do we think what's his best NBA comp? And on a scale of 1 to guaranteed, how much do we think he's going to be better than Ben Simmons?
I don't have enough zeros that I can list for that one in the factorial for how much better he is than Ben Simmons.
Yeah,
Um,
and in terms of a comp, I think it's going to be interesting to see because every level that he's played at, he's been everything to his team. He has
Mhm.
been a top three shooter. He's been the leading scorer, leading rebounder, leading assist man, and a solid on ball defender. Not
elite,
not
but good.
elite, but passable. Um,
Not Luca.
not Luca, not a turnstile. Um, so yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he gets plugged in. Maybe does he have kind of a interesting transition like Brandon Ingram did,
Hmm.
having a hard time finding a niche because of that, where he's excelled at everything but not been a savant at any one thing. And we see him take a couple of years to get his feet underneath him. I don't think that's a entirely unrealistic possibility.
So what? He's 6'9". He's he's a great athlete, but he's not the elitist of elite athletes. He's not a elite shooter. What is his game? What are we getting for? The thing that he's to me has been impressed the most to me, he's got an elite motor. Like
Hmm.
that takes him to the next step in his practices. You watch his games, he's on the floor, he's getting rebounds, he's dunking on people, he's nasty, dude. His motor's going. I don't know how well that translates to the NBA.
Yeah.
And I don't know what he's going to be able to do day one that's going to be able to make an impact on a team. LeBron, day one, he was more athletic than everybody, even as a freshman or a rookie, right? Like you gotta have something to hang your hat on. I'm not sure what that is, and I'm a little fearful of him because he's not. If he was 7 foot all day, I get it, but he's not that tall. He's 6'9", and that's gonna hurt him, I think, a little bit. So I don't know what he's gonna do, and where he's kind of a tweener in a lot of ways.
When
Still good.
When you described him, I immediately had flashbacks to Tyler Hansbrough and them saying his number one skill was his motor, and I was like, oh boy. I think the thing with Cooper Flagg though is Jonathan Givony, who knows the draft and draft process better than anyone else, uh, said, I was trying to find the quote, but something along the lines of Cooper Flagg's best skill is his work ethic and his motor, and it's a work ethic and a motor that the top consensus pick never has. And I think if you look at his progression from his senior year of high school to at Duke, his shooting's got better, his ball handling's got better, and I think the NBA game's more open where he'll be able to use his athleticism, he'll be able to use that motor. I think his shooting's going to continue to improve, and I don't know if he'll be right out the gate, like I think it can be a little bit of like Victor Wembanyama a little bit, where he struggles a little bit to create against, the elite perimeter defenders, but I think he tries too hard, and I think he's just too hard of a worker. Like a little bit like Russell Westbrook. Like that's I feel like that's a not an apples to apples comp, but another guy who was known for his work ethic, known for his motor, and maximized every bit of it.
Yeah, another comp that I might throw out there is Paulo Banchero,
Mm.
just for the general skill set
Dukiness of
that
it.
he has. Well, dukiness as well, but just being pretty good at everything.
Mm.
And obviously Cooper's not going to catch anybody by surprise coming into the league, but there was some concerns about Banchero coming in. He Folks didn't think he was going to be the number one pick until like a couple days before draft night. Um, and I think obviously he figured things out pretty quickly. So, um, you know, the skill comp, I feel pretty good about a Brandon Ingram skill comp, but obviously having a motor is going to take you to the next level. Yeah, just it'll be interesting to see how he transitions. I mean, in terms of what team that he could fit on, uh, a recurring theme for me when I'm talking about teams that people would fit well on is the Oklahoma City Thunder. And a big part of why I can bring that up is because they have the ability to actually trade assets to get said players and have it make sense. Just think about the draft capital that they have. Right now, they're sitting on somewhere in the between 7th to 10th pick range, in terms of the picks that they have from other teams right now. So obviously, the ping pong balls could fall perfectly in their favor, and we could see them getting an even better pick. But odds are the worst pick that they're going to get is somewhere in that 7 to 12 range. You take Charlotte. Charlotte gets the number one overall pick. If OKC comes to Charlotte and says, "Here is the ninth overall pick in this draft and four other firsts, give me the number one pick," it would be a hard deal to pass up as a front office, even knowing that Cooper Flagg is the number one pick.
I think you've got to put something in the pot that's actually tangible too with it. I think if you gave like, man, I don't want to say Chet, but like you got to give him a real asset to work with, I think. That's known because how often do you get this level of hype around a guy? We had Victor Wembanyama a couple years ago, and that's great. But before that, who else has been like this is the dude? And we're talking like we're in February right now. We're talking about who the number one pick is, and I don't think there's any chance that changes aside from something wild and crazy happening. Victor Wembanyama, we were talking the same thing. You,
Zion.
you don't do this very often. This is
Zion was
it's a little
another
different.
one where it was consensus all year. It was very similar to Cooper Flagg, where he kind of dominated college and was very consensus for most of the
What I'm
year.
thinking about though is the fact that like right now with trades that are going down for actual NBA stars, like bona fide stars, are happening for a medium role player and four firsts.
Hmm.
And if we're gonna give up a ninth or 10th overall pick, which in this deep of a draft class
A good
could
pick.
could be a hit, and four picks, which is essentially what we've established is roughly the equivalent of a bona fide star in the NBA.
Yeah.
At the very least, your front office staff are going to have a chit chat about that.
A
Yeah.
chit chat for sure. I just don't think you give it up. Go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say 3 weeks ago, I would completely pan this take and say there's no historical precedence for it. But there's also no historical precedence for a guy like Luka being traded. So I don't really know if history even means anything anymore. I think it
There's
would be
also
a
been
hard
there's been no precedence for a team having
also true.
17 first round picks available to
Yeah.
them over the course of 5 years. They got
What
to
if
get rid of some of them.
I think it depends on the team who wins the lottery. I think that
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big factor in it. Like if Phoenix crashes out, like kind of all things seem to be like it's going to happen with them. They crash out, they trade Kevin Durant this summer, and they land the number one pick. they're going to keep that number one pick to sell to their fans that they're drafting Cooper Flag. I think if the Wizards get the number one pick, there's a pretty good possibility because you want to talk about history. They don't have the greatest possible history on their side, but I think it's a hard sell to your fans to trade the number one pick. It rarely happened because the hype and the appeal to the number one pick on paper is way more than it is like just a bunch of like hoop heads talking about it, how it translates to the court. That's a hard sell to your fans.
So I think there is differences, right? Like if you talk about the Wizards, they need somebody to build around. Who are you building around? Cooper Flag can be the guy you build around, and so you can't. It's a hard sell. But if it is Charlotte, like I think Cooper Flag fits really well in Charlotte, first of all. But who do you have already in Charlotte? You've got Miller, you've got Ball, like
Put
you've
some
got
respect on Brandon Miller. That's my guy.
you've got pieces to work around, and I think you know Cooper Flag doesn't need to be the centerpiece there necessarily. He'd be a great piece, and if he works out, that'd be great. But man, the ninth pick and four other first rounds over the next few years to build to hopefully get some like two, three pieces to fit in there with those guys. That sounds a lot better. Like that sounds like a team that's going to be in the playoffs doing some damage in 3 to 5 years. Yeah.
They've lost I think they lost what game right before the All-Star break, so they've only lost 10 games this season. And we're talking about them adding the consensus number one overall pick. It's ridiculous.
Well, so we're talking about Cooper Flag is like this next tier guy, right? He's gonna be potentially the face of the NBA. Well, right now it seems like we're doing some changing of the guards with LeBron, KD, Curry, all are in the twilights of their career. Who do they hand the keys off to? Because I mean, I feel like this is first there's a lot of
Joel
levels.
Embiid.
Well, can I mute you?
Can we just kick him off the pod for that one?
In my defense, uh, I don't believe what I just said.
We know that. That's why you're still on the pod. We'll just start there. Who are we handing the keys off to? And is it going to be in good hands?
Well, I think there's an interesting dichotomy right now between and a lot of people have talked about this. I'd love to claim this as a novel idea, but I'm not the first. Between international stars and American-born stars. We have not had an MVP this decade who was born in America. And the MVP this year will not be born in America. It will either be a Canadian or it will be a Serbian again. And we can debate that another time. But the MVP, unless my guy Jason Tatum decides to channel his inner Larry Bird and do something even more amazing than what he's doing now, we're not going to have an American MVP. So,
Larry Bird's
that,
not as good as Jokic. Sorry.
do
Larry Bird isn't as good as Jokic. So we're
my
at
my
this
heart
rate. At
my
this
heart
rate.
is being
So,
pulled in two
all right.
different.
I'll let you continue your thought.
I don't know
Sorry.
if I can process that statement. I don't know which one I love more. But anyway, so clearly the NBA has a ton of international stars, and I think it's great. I think it's good for the game globally. It makes me think of the English Premier League when I was thinking about this because the English Premier League is arguably the best soccer league in the world. But a lot of English Premier League superstars are not English necessarily. You have a lot of Brazilians, you have a lot of like guys from other countries, I think. Um, Again, I'll defer to you on that, Nick. But you have a lot of guys who are not from the United Kingdom. That's fair to say. When they have a star from the United Kingdom, they hype that guy up like crazy. And I think that's a good allegory to the NBA and the direction the NBA is going because as great as Jokic and Giannis. And Shea is an interesting case study because Shea's right across the border from Canada, and I think he has more appeal than the Europeans for sure. But I think there's something about the American born star. And there's really good American players in the league, which I find a little head scratching how people are always panning the American born star. Like Anthony Edwards is amazing. Jason Tatum is amazing. John Morant is captivating. It's really interesting. And my last point on that is all that's to say, thank you to Nico Harrison. The face of the league going forward is going to be Luka Doncic. I don't think I would have said that if he would have stayed in Dallas, but with him being in Los Angeles, with like the Lakers, as much as I hate it, national media and everyone around the country loves the Lakers. Luka is going to be the face of the franchise, face of the league for the next 10 years.
So can you be the face of the franchise and not win a championship?
The Lakers are winning a championship. I hate it as well.
I'm not convinced of this.
I
You
think
guys know I'm a Luka hater, and I, he's going to be good there. And I do trust the Lakers to put more pieces around him than the Mavs were doing, and to be in a better situation. I just I don't. I'm out. Like I just don't see him being it for a championship team between the defense and everything being centered around him the entire time. But you know what? You guys are much smarter basketball minds than I am. I will defer to you on that, and I'm content with that.
I think it remains to be seen if Luca will be able to win a championship. There are some glaring concerns, but I don't think that necessarily takes away from the fact that he is going to be the league's poster child, um, because of his location in LA. It's unfortunate that the popularity of the league is so market tied, but at the end of the day, it's a business. And having one of the top two, three names in the league, in the biggest location in the league is good for the league. There's a reason why the ratings from like 2019 to 2021 were really high, even when they were playing in the bubble. It's because LeBron was still playing like peak LeBron, and was in LA. So that's no surprise there. I think, but like we said, it's time for the passing of the guard. Um, as the local Wemby hater, um, we have to bring up his name,
Mhm.
um, because he has garnered so much attention from NBA media over the last few years. Um, I think he's there's got to be what I'm trying to figure out is what the rivalry is going to be, because
Mhm.
for you had Jordan and Pippen going against Malone and Stockton for a handful of years. We had the Spurs and the Heat going against each other for the early 2010s. We had the Warriors and the Cavs duking it out for much of the 2000 teens. What
There's a lot of
is
Celtics and Lakers in there too.
there are some Celtics and Lakers in there too. What I'm thinking about is like the stars of those teams were really what drove the narratives around those rivalries. Maybe with the exception of the Spurs, it was kind of like the Spurs versus LeBron's legacy.
Mhm.
And but it outside of that, it was Curry versus LeBron. It was Jordan versus Malone and Stockton. It's duos or stars that um you know are the ones that are really garnering the attention, and I'm curious to see what that next wave of stars that are going to be making consistent runs deep in the playoffs are going to be, and if we'll even ever see something like that again because of the depth of the talent in the league.
So one thing I want to point out about what you're talking about, this dichotomy, this rivalry, is we're talking East Coast versus West Coast. Like there's a real factor here of like, meeting in the finals is a big deal. Yes, there is some of the inner, Eastern Conference finals, Western Conference finals are fine and good. You get some hype around that, but those kind of get lost in the noise. You always remember who played in the finals, and that game, that clash, and who's who. Like Lakers are obviously West Coast. Who's the East Coast? What are we seeing? The East, we've talked plenty of times about something wrong with your finger. Um, Go ahead, Josh.
You laugh, but the Celtics are positioned to be that Eastern Conference representative. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum are just now hitting their prime. The rest of the roster, aside from Pritchard, is starting to get a little long in the tooth, but Tatum and Brown are young enough. I think the Knicks, if the Knicks can get competent in the playoffs, the Knicks making the finals would be a big deal for the league. Like if we got
for
a
sure.
Knicks Lakers finals, that would boost ratings
That'd be
like
huge.
crazy.
Yeah. And I
You got to
think,
get a new coach to do that.
yeah, they're all going to be dead if they made the finals. Um, I think the distinction there between those two is, I think the most riveting individual in the Celtics organization is Joe Mazzulla. It is not
Mm.
a player on your roster, which is a problem for ratings. I think the most riveting person in New York can be one of a few different players.
Mm.
On any given night, it could be Cat, it could be Brunson, it could be Josh
Josh
Hart.
Hart.
Yeah,
Yes.
on any given night, and that's the case because New York has rallied around him. Um, and we have not seen the same kind of rallying around an individual for Boston.
I think
Um,
you're selling them short a little bit. I think Brown and Tatum have the support. It may not be the hardcore enthusiasm that you see from Knicks and New Yorkers because they're New York fans and
Irrational.
Knicks fans. Yeah. What's that?
Psychopathic.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree or agree with that. But there's validity to it. But I think
I know any team appreciates the fact that they have stars on their roster. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they have, the unwavering, support, love, like like the outcry that Luca got when he got traded. Uh, if Jaylen Brown got traded at the deadline for another star and a pick, there would not be the same uproar in within the basketball world that there was when Luca got traded.
well, if Luka got traded for Jokic, would you think there would be an uproar?
No.
Well,
Because I think
that's
that's the
no.
problem. You
I think
traded
there
a top
would.
three player for maybe a top 15 player.
I think there still would.
I
I
think
think
that outcry would be in Denver that Denver got rid of Jokic.
yeah,
To your Jaylen Brown point, I agree with you. If Jaylen Brown got traded, there wouldn't be that much of an outcry the same way. I think if Tatum got traded like that, there would be an outcry because Tatum is woven into the fabric of the Celtics history at this point. Like he's tied with Larry Bird for most points in a game. He's approaching all these Larry Bird records. Like he is more of a Celtic and I think will be a career Celtic more so than Jaylen Brown.
yeah. And I think you're right. I think there is something to be said about the less charismatic personality. Um,
He's the Tim
and
Duncan of this generation.
that feels right. And Tim Duncan didn't. Everybody hated Tim Duncan. Nobody liked watching Tim Duncan destroy their favorite team, but he did it almost every night. Um, yeah,
I mean,
Tatum.
he Tatum's got a better game than Duncan does to watch, right? Let's just put the cards on the table. We're not seeing bank shots all the time, and he's got Deuce. I think Deuce is a big selling point for Tatum
Mm,
as well in the culture of all Celtics things. Like that's a
yeah.
big thing in
For
Boston.
sure. I'm more just thinking about in terms of like the culture of the league as it derives from how a fan base accepts its player. When we're talking about face of the league, Kobe was a good face of the league because he was tenacious. He wasn't even like that big and outspoken at once. His first few years he was, but once he kind of got his feet planted, he wasn't, a super outgoing person with the media or anything like that. But you saw the tenacious,
Mhm.
just he was everywhere all at once, very similar to like a Russell Westbrook. The fan base is behind him. They know what you're gonna expect from him every single night, and he leaves it all out there. Tatum's just more soft spoken.
Mhm.
He definitely is attributing or contributing to all of their success, but just isn't the same face of the league type uh, person because he just doesn't have the energy revolving around him like an Anthony Edwards does.
y'all are gonna crucify me for this one, but I don't think Kobe was as much of the face of the league as you guys are kind of projecting him to be. I think there was other guys around the time before him, after him. He was in Shaq's shadow for a lot of years,
For
and
sure.
and I think there was other stuff going on between LeBron coming into the league that he kind of got cast as MJ 2.0, and he had his whole rape thing go on. Like I think there was a the face of the NBA thing's a little much for him, and you know I loved him. I think him dying has a big part of his legacy being
Mm,
especially built because
For
we
sure.
see this and we felt this and it was a big deal for us. He lost his daughter during this, like, but I don't think Kobe was really that face of the NBA for a lot of years
Not for a
because
lot of years. No,
for
I think you're
many
right.
years, right? Go ahead.
I
I think
think
from '07 to 2010, Kobe was the face of the league unequivocally. Like in '07 when he carried that team with Smush Parker and all those guys to the playoffs, scored 81, which I think that was a year or two
dude, that
before,
was
but I think it
no,
was '06.
yeah. No,
But
no,
like he had scored
81 was '07. His highest scoring year was '06. That was when he scored 36 points a game.
And,
and
and I guess
missed
what I'm
out on
getting to,
MVP.
3 years is something, but how
Yeah,
long has LeBron been a face of the league? How long has Steph really been a face of the league? Because I think they are more true to that. And I think there have been other guys who've been had their
yeah.
moments for a period of time. Hakeem Olajuwon was kind of it for a couple years there between Jordan's two seasons, right?
It's
Like
I think more what
bearish.
I'm thinking about is not even just like one person, and that's why I was talking about like rivalries. Is
Hmm.
we've talked about we're talking about passing of the guard because there's like four or five guys that are all on the way out. You know, Harden had his 2 or 3 years where
a
he
good one.
was a face of the league because of
Hmm.
his output in Houston. Curry had his handful of years. LeBron's been it for 15, 16, 17-ish years. Uh,
21.
I don't think he's been the face for all those 21, but at least 15 to 17 years.
If we can't
He's
say Victor Wembanyama's a face now, you couldn't say that LeBron was in his first 2 or 3 years either.
That's
Is that what you're
fair.
saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Um and
Westbrook too, to add to that list.
yeah, there's five or six guys that are all on the way out, and yeah, I don't need Kobe to have been the face of the league for, a decade for him to still have been the face of the league that I'm trying to find in this new
Yeah,
generation.
that's fair.
That's more the point I'm trying to make. So, um,
I
yeah,
think a guy who will be really interesting, and we've already mentioned him, is Shea. He's not American, but Canadians basically America JV. Um, and I think that the next thing that happens for the NBA now that the media rights deal is done is there's going to be expansion. There's going to be teams in Las Vegas and Seattle. And the last time the NBA expanded, except for when we put the Bobcats back in Charlotte after George Shinn moved them to New Orleans, last time there was expansion, it came in a couple waves. And it would be interesting to see if that happens again. And if Canada gets a second team, because Hoops is big in Canada. They've produced the most players in the NBA of outside of the US. And now you have Shea, who he's not my pick to be MVP, but I don't think I can be mad if I can't rationally be mad if he's MVP. I can irrationally be mad in my Tatum corner that he's MVP. But from an unbiased basketball perspective, like I have no problems with that. And he's a guy like Giannis had this quote, and Giannis has some ridiculous quotes, but he said he wanted to just shake his hand so he could have some of his aura. And I think Shea has some appeal to him, both in his game and his personality. It's
his brand, he's developed his own personal brand exceptionally well for someone that isn't particularly outspoken.
Yeah, and it's different. Like it's different for Canadians versus like Serbians or Greeks or
Sure.
whatever. Like Europeans have just a different culture. Canada basically is the same culture as the U.S.
There's a
So
relatability to North Americans as a whole, no
for
doubt.
sure, yeah. And I think
I,
I think an interesting rivalry that I would love would be Shea versus Ant. Like if we can get Minnesota OKC in the playoffs and have some battles in the playoffs, I think those are two guys. Like Shea's got his Instagram comments where he like puts his little rhymes in there with his captions, and then Ant will say anything. That would be a great rivalry for the league.
I want to go back to one quick thing you asked. You said that Canada should get another team. I don't see this hotbed of Canadian support outside of the Mississauga, Toronto area. Where else would we see a team? Calgary, Vancouver, Montreal, like those are kind of the bigger cities, and I don't get NBA vibes from the ones that I've been to at least.
Well, I've never been to Canada, so I'll have to defer to you on that. I mean, I just think putting the Grizzlies back in Canada like feels right, but maybe there isn't the support. I just think with all the Canadians coming in, and maybe it is all centralized in the Toronto metropolitan area that there it's not worth another team. But the NBA is considering putting a team in Mexico City, and they've produced zero NBA players. So
Oh, you can sell me in any Canadian city over Mexico City, so that's fine.
I think as we talk about the what the new faces of the league are, it goes without mentioning that kind of the catalyst for this conversation is the fact that ratings are down.
mhm.
And I think part of the reason ratings are down is because some of the faces that everyone's been accustomed to seeing uh, gracing the covers of ESPN magazines and on Sports Center top tens are no longer producing at that level anymore, or at least not as consistently. Um, so one of the questions that we got from our viewers a couple weeks ago was around the topic of what is there to be done about the fact of the matter that the ratings are down. What can we attribute to the ratings being down? Like why are we seeing this? What can be done to fix it? If there is a quick fix, and what are some of the potential fixes long term?
So I appreciate we're doing an in-season tournament. We're doing new All-Star game stuff. We're kind of doing things to kind of promote the game better. I don't, I feel like those are small
Gimmicky,
percentage points. What's that?
gimmicky.
They're gimmicky, but I think I mean, there's value in it. You get some more eyes on it. But I think at the end of the day, I don't think they move the needle much. I don't think they change the viewership ultimately. I think you get a few
Mhm.
more eyes. Oh, you know what? I kind of want to see, as a casual fan, I might gonna watch the All-Star game a little more because there's some more parity going on and there's people actually engaged. Great. But that doesn't like increase viewership, make me go buy jerseys, go to games more, things like that. I think there needs to be some intrinsic actual parity, some things that are going on. And I think honestly, one of the things that I'm seeing is there seems to be more and more of a barrier of entry to watching games. If you're a
Mhm.
generic person without you know, NBA League Pass, how many games do you get to watch? And who are you getting to watch?
Mhm.
You're getting to watch a lot of the same teams over and over again. And I think we don't have access. If you just have generic cable, TNT, TBS, ABC, NBC, CBS, those are kind of the main ones you get it from. You're not getting a whole lot of variety or a whole lot of teams. And I think we need better and more access to some of these games from
Yeah,
just a viewership across the country.
and I think there's kind of two sides to that coin too. It's because that's been the case forever, but we're just now in an age where everybody does have access to everything.
Mhm.
There's way too much available to us, so your our attention is being pulled in a million different directions. We have the exact same number of games that we have access to, but because there's so much available to people, their tastes are going to become more nuanced, and if they aren't getting the products that they actually want to view, like all of their local games, or for all their local games without having to pay like $150 a year for it, or just some out of network games that aren't getting shown on TNT. um, yeah, you're gonna just naturally, it's not even a knock against the league per se, it's
Yeah.
just a reality of where we are in entertainment, that it's so easy access that if the NBA doesn't provide a better solution, they're going to have fallback in the ratings.
Yeah, I think you make a
So
good point there in terms of local markets. Yeah, League Pass is amazing for me because I don't live in the Celtics local market. So it actually makes watching the Celtics games easier for me to live in the same market as your team. I forget how difficult it is, for those who are in those markets. And as questionable as some of the decisions that the Phoenix Suns under the Matt Ishbia regime have been in terms of their on-court product, see trading for Bradley Beal, off the court and in terms of fan engagement, they have been killing it. They've reduced concessions astronomically. They're making games. I don't know if it's this year or if it's next year is when they're rolling it out. They're providing games on local cable where anyone in their market can watch the games. I don't know if it's free or for a nominal cost, way cheaper than what it is now. And you juxtapose that to the people in Denver who have to subscribe to a separate like TV experience. It's the most ridiculous thing. The owners of the Denver Nuggets, for those who don't know, the owners of the Denver Nuggets started their own TV station or TV program in order to sell Nuggets games, and it's only available in certain parts of the city. So there's a lot of like Nuggets fans who can't watch their team because of the way it's set up. And now you have all Bally Sports buying a lot of these local stations and making it even more difficult to watch. I think that's a problem for the NBA from the start.
100%. Let's go on this tangent for a second, right? We're talking about billionaires who are buying these teams, and these teams, they're worth whatever they're worth. They have a better growth rate than the S&P 500 right now, and whatever their value is. I'm not even gonna, I don't know what their progression rate is, but I remember teams
Is
being sold
good.
for 10, $15 million. Now we're talking about billions of dollars for a team. And
Billions.
so we have billionaires trying to get richer off their teams, which I don't have any problem with them marketing their teams, but not at the expense of whatever. Ishbia is doing a good job, but what you see is going on for Dallas now, what you just talked about for Denver, those are that's a that's a crappy situation, right? Like that doesn't breed a basketball brand that you want to like build a community around and be a part of a state, of a city, and get bought into. Like I think maybe that's part of what this is, as well as we don't have as many homegrown teams. People that like you grew up around and you have an affinity to because that's who your dad followed, that's who your grandpa followed, and that's where you guys kind of all grew up around. Because now we have because that's those are the games that were on TV, right? Sunday, growing up in Michigan, you had the Lions on TV because that was the local network, and everybody was a Lions fan for me. But
Yeah,
now
I think that this is even. I think Laker fans have experienced this exact phenomenon for a little longer than the average team, just because of their location in LA. The actual spot that crypto.com arena, no, Staples Center is located, there is a massive Laker fan base there that are in the mid to low income range that never get to attend games because they get priced out by all the celebrities that are attending games. And that's been the case for a while now. I was talking with some of my family about the fact that the Lakers haven't had a very good home court in 25 plus years. And you can pretty much exclusively attribute it to that because I mean you can see it by the fan base that showed up outside of Staples after Kobe passed is entirely different than the fan base that you actually see show up in the arenas. And I think we're just now seeing that happen on a broader scale as these corporations, individuals are buying up the assets and making them harder to access.
don't like it.
I think it goes back to my original point, though. I think Luca being in LA, like we can queue up the conspiracy theories, but Luca, at worst, he's the fifth best player in the league, even despite all of his warts. Him being in LA is a major gain for the league.
I'm really curious how he does in the spotlight. Just being an international guy, English is not his first language. He doesn't always have the most gregarious, outgoing personality. Like, how does he fit into this whole thing? And I don't disagree. He's got every opportunity to be successful here, and I think this is the hope is that Luca does it.
Well, I think to kind of answer your question, because I've thought about this way too much, his connection to Pau Gasol is a major thing. He might be Slovenian, but he is Spanish almost as much as he is Slovenian, and the heritage of Pau Gasol with the Lakers is a legitimate thing. I think if it was Jokic going to LA, that would be the worst matchup of superstar and city in the world. Jokic would not do well in
True.
LA, but I think Luca and I mean his girlfriend, fiance, baby mama is Spanish. Like he speaks Spanish. Like I think he's, Jordan, you can answer this better than me, but I think like the LA community, especially the Spanish speaking community, is going to gravitate to Luca.
Anybody, if anybody gets a sign off from Pau Gasol,
Mhm.
they are going to be cherished. Pau is one of the most loved stars that I can remember,
Yeah.
and that goes back to hearing people tell stories about stars from the past that were well loved. Pau is right up there at the top of the list, um, because of obviously the success they had on the court, but also everything he's done for the community off the court. So anybody that gets his stamp of approval, it's gonna be a good thing for ratings for sure. Um,
Nico, I have some Luca Kool-Aid if you want some. Just let me know. I will share.
No, I'm good.
as a transition here, we talked about the corporations being a big part of why ratings are probably down. But also we have to talk about the product that's being put out on the court, whether that's production by the players being down for just poor performance, but also something that Nick and I were talking about before we started was there's been a couple different instances where players have been getting interviewed by the media and they're currently out due to injury. And they have flat out said to the interviewers, I feel ready to play, but I am a member of the fill in the blank team
Philadelphia
organization.
76ers.
Exactly. There was one of those reports from 76ers. Zion was very explicit with
Hmm.
in an interview about being like, I am in game shape and I am ready to play, but I am part of the New Orleans Pelicans business. And
This comes back to the thing we were talking about before, though, about, this is no longer a fans league. This is no longer a place where you're trying to get your fans engaged. You're trying to get the kids involved. You're trying to do all this stuff because those players, they're being viewed entirely as an asset. It's being viewed as a business. I want to protect this asset. I'm going to use the asset when and if I can get some value out of it to get the rights, get the eyes on it, to get the viewership. But that's all I'm viewing them are as an asset. And that's the reason they're holding them out of games, even if they want to play.
I think that's a legitimate thing. I think though, as kind of a pushback to that, the two guys I love on this are Ant and Tatum, and they've gone on record and saying, I don't miss games, especially on the road, because, this might have been some kid's Christmas present to get to see me play in the city. And I know, Tatum's played through injuries. Like there's been times where they want him to sit out. And he's like, no, I'm playing. So it's funny. Most of the time when Tatum sits out for rest games, it's at
at
home.
home, yeah.
And Ant said a similar thing. And I think if you look at those two, like going forward, you know, it's
How
wild, the whole Zion thing. I mean, that's its whole like case study, and I don't even know what to make of that half the time. Because you're right, like he says these interviews like I'm ready to go, and the team's like, nah, he's actually not ready to go. And then he'll do some crazy dunk in practice or something. But I think some of it is the players themselves, like the Sixers guys, Zion. It's like Kawhi saying, I'm ready to go, but the teams doesn't want me to go. Although I don't know if Kawhi would ever say that. But I think especially with Ant and Tatum, there's enough pushback with guys that are like, I want to play.
I agree. I see Tatum wanting that, and I think that's part of the fabric of the Celtics organization as well, which I think contributes to it. And probably Missoula plays a large role in that. Love Missoula. But also, like if you look at the personality of Ant versus a Kawhi versus a Joel Embiid,
Hmm.
like those are you. How to put this? Whatever you hear coming out of Ant's mouth is really what he believes. Like there's no veiling what Ant
Ant
thinks.
is 100% unfiltered at all
Yes.
times.
Yes. He may strike curse words from his language to be PC enough to be like interviewed, but that's about it, right? Like he's saying how he feels and you get it raw and pretty unadulterated. I think other guys are just kind of going through their careers doing what they need to. Joel Embiid, Kawhi Leonard sometimes. And I'm not saying they're phoning it in. I'm just saying they don't have the same kind of raw enthusiasm anymore that they used to.
Well, fine, I'll say it. I think they're phoning it in. I mean, and yeah, this is an example from past years, but my one of my favorite ones is Lance Stevenson, who had his year with the Pacers where he put up like 18, 7 and 7 in a contract year. And then afterwards, I don't think he averaged more than like 8 points a game for the rest of his career. And we all
Derek
know,
Coleman, all-star.
yeah, we all know exactly what was going on there. But yeah, I think to Josh's point, the um your Ants and your Tatums, they are making the active decision to play games. And if like obviously if the organization pushes against it hard enough, the player won't be able to be on the floor because the coach won't put him in the game. But if you're the face of a franchise or you're a key star player, you more likely than not have enough sway to be able to say, no, you've said that I am medically at 90-95%, whatever that might be. I also know my own body, and I know that this is an important game. I'm playing. And we I don't think we're seeing nearly as much of that as uh, you know I don't I feel like I don't bring up Kobe all the time, but I'm going to bring him up for the second time in this podcast. How many times did we see him dislocate a finger, go over to Vidi on the sideline, get it popped back in, and then go straight back into the game? Or the game where he separated his shoulder and shot a few times left-handed before coming out at the end of the quarter or whatever it was.
So do
Uh,
we see the NBA becoming a little soft? Like if you look, I mean, soccer's soft. Like I played soccer, you watch the flopping, it's soft. But if you watch the NHL, you watch the NFL, those dudes are out there week in, week out getting their butts handed to them. And they're back out there doing their thing. Teeth getting knocked out, I'm back in there, right? Like there is what's going on? Why is there like this? Maybe I'm going to, maybe this is a topic for another day, but like, why are we so masculine and strong in some of these sports and other ones we're just flailing around selling calls? Like, I feel like this is part of the flopping is kind of ingrained in this the same mentality, right?
Yeah, well, there's two different, let's be real, there's two different seasons in the NBA. There's regular season and there's playoffs. And the regular season is when you see the Joel, Kawhi antics of, oh, I'm not playing on back-to-backs, or, I played 3 games in the last 7 days. I'm not playing this one, or whatever it is. In the playoffs, I think there are more guys laying it on the line. Like, famously Isaiah Thomas, the Celtic version missed out on a massive, massive contract because he played through a hip injury in the playoffs. Now, there's some reports over the Celtics weren't completely clear on that, but he played through this hip injury in the playoffs. Porzingis last year was told by the Celtics medical staff, don't play in the finals, and he played in the finals. Like there's more instances of guys playing through injuries in the playoffs than there is in the regular season, which goes to the obvious point. So then what's the issue with the regular season? Everyone says shortening the regular season is something we should
Mhm.
look at. And I don't know if that's the answer. I think on some degree it is probably. I think ideally having 2 to 3 games a week would be ideal for the NBA and
yeah.
being able to market it. But the historical traditionalist in me doesn't want to shorten the season because the shortened season's always been this way.
Yeah, and that's definitely the hurdle to overcome is the traditionalist. But yeah, I think I'd agree. I like what they've done with, requiring some of the attaining certain number of
Hmm.
games played, and I think we're going to see that become a larger factor the longer it's implemented because
Agreed.
there are supermax implications to making an all NBA team. And
Hmm.
since making an all NBA team requires a certain number of games played, and so many guys are shooting for those super maxes, we're going to see more guys trying to play the full season of games. But I too wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing that or if we see the season get shortened. Um, I'd rather have the season shortened than them change the length of a game from 48 minutes down to 40 minutes, like was
Agreed.
mentioned a week ago or so. Um, giving one or two extra rest days a week, it would go a long way because obviously in the last 30 to 40 years, I think the average athleticism in the league has gone up, but it's not like the limitations to the human body have gone up that much too. So, in the words of Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility, also known as great chance to get injured. Um, the higher you are in the air, the harder you're hitting the ground, and so I don't think it's surprising that we're seeing more injuries. Whether or not guys are being soft about it is not a part of the conversation that I'm gonna, you know, highlight here. But just giving an extra day or two of rest can hopefully decrease those injuries. And having your best product on display is pretty helpful for ratings.
Yeah. Adam Silver, hit us up. We've got all the answers to fix the league.
All right, gentlemen. I don't think we're completely fixing it, just the three of us here tonight, but I think that's a pretty good encapsulation of a lot of good ideas. So,
I think it's a good place to start.
good place to start. Yeah. Any adjourning thoughts before we wrap this bad boy up?
Ready to get the second half of the season started.
Let's
It'll be
go.
an interesting stretch run with everything going on.
Let's go. All right. Well, for all our listeners, thanks for tuning in again to the Uninsured Ankles podcast. Keep those friend groups tight and your ankles laced up even tighter.